Hey, my handsome ladies and gentlemen, this is Shmeaty. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. To commemorate the glorious return of the Ultra League, I am going to be running a pretty silly Pokemon. And the silly Pokemon in question is Shadow Cactturn. Now, I have spent the last couple weeks grinding the XL candy necessary so I can bring you guys this video. So, why did I decide on Shadow Cactturn? Well, pretty simply, Shadow Cactturn does have a pretty interesting niche into a lot of the meta mons that people are running. If people are going to not be running Fury Cut or Gliscor, that's a terrible lead. We are going to immediately save switch into the Dusknoir, met with a G-Zing. Now, if people are going to rely on picks like Gastrodon, Bellibolt, Dusknoir, Lapras even, it seems as if that the Shadow Cactturn can put in quite a bit of work into pretty common picks in the meta, so I decided to see if I could land any of my Shadow Cacturning onto those top meta picks. Unfortunately, in game number 1, not looking too hot for the Cactturn, as so far we have a G-Zing and a Fury Cutter Gliscor on the lead. There's absolutely no play for the Cactturn so far, but hopefully their third Pokemon is slightly weak to it at the very least. We are going to be able to make Shadow Punch after Shadow Punch up against the G-Zing. They are going to bring in a Jellicent. And Jellicent is one of those Pokemon I was looking for. That is a very Cacturnable Pokemon, and they are going to bring in the Gliscor. Gliscor going to look to commit to an Earthquake here. I am, of course, going to not be able to shield this up. So an Earthquake does do about 60, maybe 55% to my Lapras. Lapras now going to fire off the Sparkling Aria onto the Gliscor, gonna grab that final shield, and they don't throw, meaning that we are going to be able to connect with a Sparkling Aria. This Aria is going to KO the Gliscor, and with no way of getting rid of the Cactturn, they are forced to concede the match. We've got a deceptively bad matchup for the Cactturn in the next match, as it's going to be Cactturn leading into Swampert. Now, Swampert has access to Sludge, which it does make after 5 Mud Shots, and that super effective poison type damage nearly one-shots the Cactturn, even from a non-shadow. The opponent is going to safe switch into a Venusaur, and I am so terribly confused at that play that I literally couldn't even formulate the sentence properly there. They're going to fire off Frenzy Plan number 2, but that just means that they're going to get hexed down if I commit a shield. Back in comes the Swampert, and I'm actually happier to see it here than on my Grass type, oddly enough. I'm going to be able to fire off a Shadow Punch. I don't think I quite have enough energy for the Dynamic Punch, but I'm going to click on that side anyway, and it looks like we have the Dynamic Punch loaded. Dynamic Punch now onto the Swampert, nearly picking up the knockout, and now I'm just going to bring in the Lapras. They are going to now bring in their Virizion. This is not the best spot for me, unfortunately. Lapras forced to no-shield a potential Sacred Sword or Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade is actually the better move to go for in that situation. We're going to bring in the Cactus. Cactus going to be firing off a Trailblaze here, looking to boost up whatever Sucker Punch damage we can get, and my opponent says you're not going to be getting any as they fire off a move immediately to remove the Cactus. Yes, that Sacred Sword just did all of our health. You did not see that improperly. We're going to be able to bring back in the Lapras, fire off an Ice Beam, and now we just have to make sure that an Ice Beam can land onto this Virizion, so we are going to be very careful to throw our next charge move on good timing. They are going to actually stay in here, and in the middle of their next double kick, I'm able to get yet another Ice Beam. This is going to be game over for that Virizion. However, the Swampert has loaded energy, but they are very low on health. Swampert goes for the Sludge. Sludge not going to be enough to KO. Lapras holds and is able to Sidewave down. Target acquired in the next match. It's going to be Shadow Cactturn leading up against a Bellibolt, and it's a Sucker Punch Bellibolt to boot. The Sucker Punch Bellibolt matchup is a lot better than the Thundershock Bellibolt matchup. Although you do resist the electric type damage, you are going to be in a pretty awkward spot where the Bellibolt can do quite a bit of damage to you with the quicker pacing to the problematic charge. They are going to be able to connect with a problematic charge, and I see this as an opportunity for them to attempt a catch, so I'm not going for the Trailblaze this time. I'm going for the boosted Dynamic Punch, lands onto a Corviknight safe switch, and now we're just going to bring in our Dusknoir. This could very well be a payback. I decide to no-shield it at the last second, and it is going to be a Sky Attack. I am going to look to build up as much energy as I can here and fire off a Shadow Punch, hopefully looking to pick up the knockout versus this Corviknight. And they are going to let the Corviknight go down. They're bringing back in the Belly Bolt. Belly Bolt is going to be met with a Dynamic Punch from the Shadow Dusknoir. Dusknoir very happy to fire off that move, and now I think I'm going to shield here as I want to be able to remove this Pokemon from the field. 2 more hexes. This is alignment, but I'm able to make the Dynamic Punch, and this Dynamic Punch should very well KO the low health Belly Bolt. Belly Bolt goes down, and in the back it's going to be Golisopod. I look to commit to a move, and I get Fury Cutter down. The very poor HP stat on the Shadow Dusknoir coming back to haunt me, and now I have to bring in my Lapras as Cactturn can never see this Pokemon. If Cactturn ever sees this Pokemon, we are in a losing position. They're going to fire off a X-Scissor here. X-Scissor not going to do the most amount of damage onto Lapras. I'm looking to fire off a move here, but not before they fire off more energy of their own. This is getting very, very tricky. The Golisopod is still quite healthy. I'm going for the Ice Beam here. Ice Beam does do slightly more damage than the Sparkling Aria. I think I need to commit to another. The charge move shows up for like a millisecond there and then decides not to anymore. I don't know what that was about, but the second Ice Beam will knock out. GG's. Getting into the next game, and it is a terrible lead. Shadow Cactturn leading into G-Zing. I am going to immediately need to safe switch into the softer of my 2 answers, which is going to be the Dusknoir. Dusknoir is going to fire off a Shadow Punch up against the safe switch of their Dusknoir, but their Dusknoir is at a significant pacing disadvantage. And they're going to fire off a Shadow Punch here, but because that last Hex just snuck through, look at what happens. 1 Shadow Punch and a full Hex down of the opposing Dusknoir. They're going to be able to bring back in the G-Zing and potentially grab my last shield or deny me of all this energy. But I'm not letting all of this energy go without a fight. So I'm putting up a shield here, and G-Zing is not going to be very comfortable with taking Shadow Punch after Shadow Punch. I am at 100 energy here, and now I really have to hope that they don't have another Brutal Swing in 1 here, and they do not. So now I'm going to fire off yet another Shadow Punch. They do have a Brutal Swing loaded here, but I'm just going to fire off this Shadow Punch blindly. If they decide to switch, they decide to switch. I can't really do anything about it, but they don't. The Shadow Punch is going to connect, and that still does quite a bit of damage. The G-Zing now at about 50% health. Of course, Cactturn can't do very much of anything in this matchup. I'm positive if a Sludge lands from this Pokemon, it'll do 100%. They are going to bring in a Drifloon in the back, and we switched in time. This means that this is a CMP tie to their Icy Wind. The Icy Wind is going to do infinite damage because Cactturn can never take a move to save its life. But we are in a truly tremendously good position here. We live on 1 HP, that's a little bit worse. I decide to maximize the farm I can get on my Lapras so I don't throw a boosted Sucker Punch there. That's going to be impactful here in just a second, as they are going to be able to reach a move, but it's just an Icy Wind. They knew they would get farmed down otherwise. They actually could have committed to the Shadow Ball there. Nevertheless, I'm firing off an Ice Beam onto the incoming G-Zing. They are going to have to take that Ice Beam on the chin, and they're going to be able to fire off a move here, but if this is anything short of a Play Rough or Overheat, it won't KO. I don't even know if those moves would KO. Lapras is pretty disgustingly bulky in the Ultra League, reaching that last second Sparkling Aria. That'll be a GG. Getting into the next game, another pretty deceptively bad lead for the Shadow Cactturn, as it's going to lead into a Shadow Feraligatr. Now, that is a pretty deceptively bad matchup, as I said, because the Feraligatr can just go straight Hydro Cannon, and a Hydro Cannon does 50% of the Cacturn's health. That is not a good position to be in as the Cactturn at all. They are going to safe switch into their Talonflame, and Talonflame is going to fire off a Flame Charge, which is no-shielded by the Lapras. I figure if I no-shield a Brave Bird, I live it, and I can potentially grab a shield back and have a shield advantage from this matchup. They are going to go for the Flame Charge once, and the second Flame Charge as well. That's not going to be enough to KO. I can throw 3 more Psywaves and get to another Sparkling Aria. If they want this Talonflame energy, they are going to have to double shield, and they are now down 2 shields. We're bringing back in the Dusknoir, looking to fire off some energy onto the Talonflame before they're able to fire off a move of their own. They have quite a lot of energy here. They're actually going to bank all that energy for later. They bait back out my Cactturn here, but Cactturn is going to be aligned onto one of the best Pokemon for it to see, and that Pokemon is Sucker Punch Belly Bolt. Sucker Punch Belly Bolt, of course, in a terrible position here. We are just going to shield up the problematic charge, and the Sucker Punch is actually not doing quite a lot of damage to the Cactturn here. They're going to bring back in the Talonflame. For some reason, I go for the Dynamic Punch. I'm pretty sure a boosted Trailblaze would have done the trick. They are going to bring back in the Feraligatr, realizing there is no more win con. They are going to top left. Okay, sorry guys, it looks like I woke up in 2023 because there's a Cresselia on my screen in the Open Ultra League. That is definitely not a pick you see every day in 2025. I must be a time traveler. Nevertheless, I'm going to fire off a Trailblaze onto the Cresselia, which is staying in up against the Cactturn. They've done next to no damage with their Psycho Cuts, so I'm very happy to stay in and just look to one shield farm them down. But they are going to switch into their Talonflame, which is going to be answered with the Lapras. And because they stayed in so long for that Cresselia matchup, I'm pretty positive that this trainer does not have a good answer to the Cactturn outside of this Talonflame. I'm going to fire off a Sparkling Aria here. They are actually going to shield it up, and I can go ahead and fire off Sparkling Aria number 2, and I'm just not afraid of this Talonflame right now. They can go for a KO with the Fly here, and they are going to overfarm as much as they can. Very intelligently played by my opponent here. They fire off the Fly, it's going to KO, and now I'm bringing in the Dusknoir. Once again, we're in this little bit of an awkward position where Dusknoir just doesn't have the damage output to get the KO here. If we were on Astonish, we would definitely have that, but unfortunately right now we do not. They are going to hard pivot into the Giratina. Giratina going to be met with the Sucker Punch Cactturn. Cactturn is going to fire off the Trailblaze. Massive damage. For it being resisted onto a Giratina, that is indeed massive damage. They're going to fire off yet another move here. It's a Dragon Claw that does quite a bit of my remaining health, and I am going to go down to another Dragon Claw here. That last one did like half my health, to be honest. Cactturn is not the Pokemon that you want with 0 shields remaining. They are going to be able to reach one final move up against my Dusknoir, and this is fine. I get the full farm down, and now I am going to fire off a Shadow Punch at whatever they bring in, but in doing so, I have just guaranteed that I will lose this game. Shadow Punch will KO the Cresselia, and they bring back in the Talonflame. However, the Talonflame is 1 Incinerate off of the move, and I am very low on health with my Dusknoir, so we just don't have enough damage output to get the KO onto the Talon. This is going to be a GG. That was a very close one. Getting into the next one, we're going to act like we did not read that trainer's name, and it's going to be Shadow Cactturn leading into Corviknight. Not entirely sure where the Corviknight uprising is coming from. Its community day is at the end of the month. Again, maybe I'm traveling through time. I'm going to save switch into my Dusknoir, and we're met with a Thundershock Belly Bolt. Thundershock Belly Bolt is going to be pretty substantially better for the Dusknoir than its Sucker Punch counterpart, because we are not resisting the fast move pressure, but it's Thundershock, so there's not quite a lot of fast move pressure to go around. They just made this next problematic charge, so I am going to shield this one up, fire off 3 more hexes, and be able to fire off the back-to-back Dynamic Punches. Dynamic Punch number 1 will get the Belly Bolt really low, and I'm going to settle for a Shadow Punch on the second move. The reason for this is because I can save just a little bit of residual energy, which may very well come in handy later on. They are going to now bring in a Purified Credilli. Credilli is now going to be tasked with potentially taking a Dynamic Punch here. They are going to actually shield it up, and now 2 more hexes. We make another Dynamic Punch. I don't believe this was a CMP tie. If it was, it's going to be even better of a spot for me. They're going to double shield it, and now back in comes the Cactturn. Cactturn, they didn't react in time, so this Dynamic Punch will land onto the shieldless Cradily. Now, the screenshot for the boys. I'm no shielding whatever this is. The Rock Tomb does infinite damage, but that doesn't really matter because we can get a little bit of Sucker Punch chip onto the Corviknight to get it to about 50% HP, and now we can just bring in our Lapras, and there's nothing the Corviknight's going to be able to do here. No matter what move they have, they just don't have the damage output to remove this full health Lapras from the field. They go for Payback number 1. It's just too expensive a move. Here comes Payback number 2. But unfortunately for this trainer, Payback is just not going to cut it. Lapras would be able to outpace and still has a shield. GG's to this trainer. The Pokemon I am seeing tonight is going to be Cactturn up against Venusaur number 2, by the way. This is not a very common Ultra League Pokemon whatsoever. We are going to build up just before we make the Trailblaze, wait a turn, then switch and catch the Sludge Bomb on to the Dusknoir where it's going to be resisted. We snuck the Hex through, so this incoming Feraligatr is going to have a pretty tough time. By the way, I tapped my charge move and the game didn't register it. You love to see it. I'm going to fire off yet another move onto this Feraligatr. The first dynamic punch did an insane amount of damage onto them, so they are forced to shield up this next move. Unfortunately, they're able to get the full Shadow Claw down. Now I'm just bringing in the Lapras. I truly do not care. If they Hydro Cannon me, great. But they Ice Beam me, the screenshot for the boys, and now Lapras is going to commit to the full Sidewave farm down, and I am just far too ahead of the opponent in this game. There's not a single thing the opponent can do to recover this game. They're going to fire off yet another Hydro Cannon here, but this just isn't an impactful amount of damage onto the Lapras. Lapras able to get that Sidewave farm down, and now if they bring back in the Venusaur, it is not safe at all. We are going to build up to 100 energy and fire off an Ice Beam onto the Venusaur. This Ice Beam is no shielded, the Venusaur goes down, they're going to bring in their Skeleturge, and this is going to be cinematic. Sparkling Aria shielded, Zero Turn switch in to the Cactturn, 2 Sucker Punches, landing the Trailblaze. Trailblaze here is going to boost our attack, and now watch this. They are now 5 Sucker Punches away, so it's a simultaneous KO, but with Lapras alive in the back, that's going to be a win. We've made it to the final game of the video, Shadow Cactturn leading into an Ampharos. It's a non-Shadow Ampharos as well, so I don't fear the damage output from this Pokemon quite as much as if it were a Shadow. I am going to see them safe switch into a Poison Jab Kommo-o. I don't even know what's happening anymore. I'm going to shield up a move. It's a Brick Break. I really think that could have only been a Brick Break too. So, pretty poor shield by me, but I am going to fire off this Shadow Punch, hoping that I can grab a shield in return, and I am able to. I now have the Dynamic Punch, and if Kommo-o doesn't drop both shields, they're going to lose a lot of health here, and they do lose a lot of health. That is going to likely be a Clanging Scales. I think I'm going to shield this up and commit to a farm down because I don't think they can make another move. And the opponent realizes that as well, bringing in the Gliscor. Gliscor is going to have to fire off energy onto the Dusknoir in order to KO it. I'm going to fire off a Shadow Punch here. They allow me to make 2 Shadow Punches, which is very nice for me. Of course, we know Cactturn can never afford to shield this Pokemon. They fire off a move here, and since I'm debuffed, even an Aerial Ace is going to be enough to pick up the knockout here, and they do go for the Aerial Ace. Bringing in the Lapras, tapping away, making sure I don't get one turn bring in. Elam Trick Insane, they're going to fire off a move. It's going to be an Aerial Ace onto the Lapras as well. Should have committed to the Earthquake, I would imagine, but they were getting pretty low, so maybe they got scared that they would have gotten farmed down. They fire off a Thunder Punch with their Ampharos, bringing in the Cactus. Cactus goes for the Trailblaze. Trailblaze onto the Ampharos is going to KO. If they no-shield it, they no-shield it, and the opponent has no more answer for the Cactus. That's a GG. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really did enjoy running Shadow Cactturn in the Ultra League. However, would I recommend that you build your own Shadow Cactturn? At level 50, you're looking to spend about 650,000 Stardust, and I just don't know if that's a decent enough investment to RPS some top meta Pokemon. Its defensive typing is absolutely abysmal, and it's pretty hard to team build around because of that fact, but its typing also gives it some pretty good matchups into a lot of the common Pokemon that you can see in the Ultra League. So, I don't think its job is done. At the ELO range I was playing at not too long ago, this Pokemon seems as if it would have been highly impactful. However, I did lose a lot of ELO running some pretty silly things recently, so I am going to look to make a push, and maybe we can even run Shadow Cactturn back in the future when we have a little more of those common Pokemon like Gastrodon, Dusknoir, Drifblim popping up on our screen. If you guys would like for me to run back the Shadow Cactus, I know this is already a Shadow Cactus video, but maybe if we can get enough footage of it being good, we can gaslight ourselves into it actually being a good Pokemon or something. I don't know. Let me know in the comments section down below. As always, I've been Shmeaty. Thank you all once again so much for watching. I hope to see you all again next time, and have a good rest of your day. See ya.